This is Malvin. I gave birth to him a year ago. It was his birthday 3 days ago. But this has been like a big part of it as well. Like, I always knew I needed a support animal. He's a support animal. He's not always supportive, but he's there. Aren't ya? You like to sit like people, don't you? And he's off. So my name is Leah Morell. I was born in a little town called Bowral in Southern Highlands, and I grew up in a town called Yandera, very small town with about 60 people in it. So I have 2 sisters and a brother that are all older than me. I'm the baby of the family. My mum and dad worked massive hours to try and provide for us. My dad's the captain of the fire brigade, so volunteer, and then my mum was deputy captain. It was evident that we struggled a little bit financially and stuff like that. We probably seemed like a fairly normal family, but I think behind closed doors, that was a very argumentative household to kind of grow up in. For me, that was challenging. I was always trying to be the peacemaker in the family. Yeah, I didn't like it at all. I struggled massively. I just wanted that happy family that my friends seemed to have. My family wasn't like that behind closed doors, and I guess it was challenging seeing the normality of other people's and then comparing that with my own and seeing the big difference there. That was kind of hard, and I kind of hated that. So I kind of break up my childhood in 2 sectors because I think I dealt with things differently in primary school versus high school. So in primary school, dealing with my family and things very much looked like me trying to put on the brave face for everyone else and trying to, problem solve everyone else's issues and how can I make my mum feel better or how can I make my sister feel better. I never really did a very good job of it, it didn't seem, but I tried really hard to kind of be that, I guess, happy person in the family. And I think I just hit a point where I realised that there was nothing I could do about any of it, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fix anything at home, and it just kept getting worse and worse and more volatile and more toxic. And I think as I kind of grew up, I would step in more, and that would make a lot of the fights turn towards me. Year 7's kind of where I turned to drugs. My drug use escalated pretty quickly. I started smoking cigarettes and I started smoking weed. It was my best friend at the time, and her parents used to sell weed, and they first gave it to us in year 7. Really quickly, I think within a year, it turned from like this social party thing that I was doing to fit in to realizing the edge that it took off for me, and my emotions, and the fact that I didn't know how to deal with my emotions, and it just snowballed. And I think by year 8 and year 9, I couldn't get out of bed without knowing that I had weed sitting there waiting for me because I just was so afraid to deal with myself. And from there it just turned to everything else. I remember I was diagnosed with depression when I was about 16, and I was prescribed antidepressants, and I took them for about a month, but then I ran out of money to pay for them. And then I asked my mum, and she laughed at me and told me that I don't need that. And I very quickly was like, oh, well, you know what? I don't need it because I've got my other medicine, which is marijuana. And if I have that, then I'll be fine. And that's how I kind of looked at it. To me, it was that thing that was helping me get through my life. Yeah. But I think it's scary how quickly it becomes normal. As a young kid, I used to look at drugs and know that they were bad, but it's amazing how quickly you can normalize all of that behaviour. I started fighting with my family a lot, especially my dad, that was probably his heaviest drinking stage, and when he drinks he becomes quite, not violent physically, but verbally and emotionally very abusive. So I was always left feeling really high emotions after that, because he would name call and things like that and say really crappy things to me. And same as at school, I got bullied a lot. All of the things that were so painful for me to experience, I would smoke weed and that would all kind of fade out into the distance, you know. I was really good at putting on a happy face on the outside for everyone else to see. I don't think many of my friends really realised the depth of how much I was hurting. But it was just a constant in the back of my head, a constant battle, I guess. I never got taught how to process my emotions or what to do with all those feelings. I think I tried really hard to get noticed and to, I don't know, someone to help me deal with my stuff, but nobody really knew how to help me, and so I was just left on my own, and drugs were there for me when nobody else was, so yeah. There was definitely good times in my teenage years, and I would have a lot of fun sometimes, but it's hard to kind of stay in those good moments, if that makes sense. So it's like you experience a good moment for a brief time and you just straight back down to the depths of where you started from. Even though nothing major has happened to put you there, you're just automatically back there. And I very much just felt trapped in those feelings. I didn't know how to get out of them. They dictated my entire day. I thought if I experienced that in the morning, then great, my whole day is ruined and that's how I'm going to be for the rest of the day and there's no way out. Yeah, I guess it's a prison of your own emotions. Mm-hmm. In my high school, the girls in my year kind of went through a phase of self-harm. And I remember looking at that situation and going, that makes no sense, they're just doing it for attention, and being really judgmental. Then I tried it and it made sense. So when I was a baby, I used to, when I would cry, I would scratch my face. And that's something that has never really left me. When I was a teenager, I used to feel that too, and I would pull my own hair, I would scratch. I would try not to scratch my face because it would like left me with a lot of shame, because you have to then face the world with your face. I stopped doing that, and self-harming was like this way that I could do it and get the anger and the frustration of my life out. I think it was just a nice way for me to stop the inner feelings that I couldn't do anything about and make them into a physical thing that I could do something about. Yeah. So most evenings I would just be locked in my room with screaming music going, and I would just cry for extended periods of time. Yeah, I cried a lot, and I would often self-harm to try and stop the feeling. I would get so angry that I'm stuck in the feeling, so I could be depressed and it very quickly turns to rage, because it's like that frustration of, why do I feel like this? Why can't I get out of it? Yeah, I think nobody really knew what to do with me. They would see kind of cuts and they would like hear me screaming, but nobody knew what to do, so nobody did anything. Yeah. And I was so convinced that that was the best thing that I could do for my family, was kill myself, because all I was doing was bringing all this pain and misery to everyone. Like, yeah, I knew that the damage I was doing. The first and the last one were probably the most intense, so I think all I really wanted was for someone to help me, and I don't know what I thought that looked like. So I guess I just wanted them to notice that what I was dealing with was real and I needed real help. I very much believed in mental health and depression and things like that because I was stuck in it. But my family come from that old school kind of perspective of mental health, like, you're fine, get over it. I asked for help from my parents and they kind of just laughed at me and made a joke of it. And I guess I just wanted them to be the ones that would help me and drive me around places. I ended up moving out of home when I was 15 because of that. We had a massive argument and I went and lived with that guy, and we weren't even in a happy relationship, but at the end of the day he was the one that was willing to help me, take me to my appointments that I needed to go to, and I tried really hard to deal with my mental health then, but again, I just ended up dealing with it with drugs, and that was the easier option, I guess. So I guess tied in with drugs, relationships also became a bit of a coping mechanism for me. So from my teenage years, I'm about 14 onwards, I think, is where relationships kind of kicked into a coping mechanism for me. Never looked at it that way in those moments. Definitely never saw it as that. Something that I was very blind to, and blind to the chaos that it caused me personally. I was very much feeling that need for love and relationship through men. Didn't really realise that it was such an issue until recently, like until the past couple of years, I guess. Yeah, but I was never single for very long at all. But it was just that need, that part of me that just wanted to be loved and to be accepted, and that was my easiest way to get it. Relationships were definitely a massive problem for me. I thought that they were the thing that were helping, but it's not helpful when I never give myself time to process and to deal with me, because I'm just always going from one thing to another, to another, to another. And then you feel the good feelings for a little bit, and then you deal with the heartache again, and then you get good feelings again. It's just a constant cycle. 100% I was codependent in the fact that I was looking to other people to meet the needs that I needed filled. And I think that's healthy in some ways, but not to the lengths that I was going. So I think when I moved in with Sam, my boyfriend when I was 15, that used to drive me around and help me, and I went massively downhill from there. So I started using pills, gas, acid, coke, all these other drugs. His friend who used to sell drugs, so I would go and pick up thousands of pills for him. I used to do that, and he would just give us free drugs as a result of that. Yeah. That's where I kind of got a taste of selling drugs, moving drugs, all of that kind of thing, and how easy it is. It used to baffle me how easy it was for me to go and do that, and then I would have whatever I wanted as a result of that. So all of that kind of normalized drugs, but I was also working all the time. So for me, I thought, well, there's nothing wrong with it because I'm still functioning. I decided that I needed to quit marijuana because I wasn't coping. I noticed that I had turned into this person that massively couldn't cope. It caused massive issues between me and my ex at the time, and I would have these meltdowns over nothing, and I knew that that was not helping, because the things that I was melting down over was like not being able to find something to wear. I would have a full-on meltdown where I would smash things. Like, I guess I always thought about it as though, like, do you remember the ads on TV when they used to advertise for ice, and they would have this guy in a hospital and he would be smashing things and losing his mind because he couldn't get ice? That was me with marijuana. I was spending about $150 a day on marijuana. So we had no money. We both worked constantly and had nothing to show for it. I thought it was the thing that was fixing all my emotional stuff, but at some point I realised it was not helping at all. It was only making it worse, which was a pretty scary realisation to admit to myself as well, because it meant letting go of the one thing that I thought was saving me. I was okay for about 6 to 8 months. I moved to Hamilton Island to try and get myself out of everything, and that went all right for about 3 months I was there, but I didn't have drugs there, but I just drank heavily. So I just drank every day. I ended up losing that job because I was hungover and missed a lot of shifts, and then I came back and lost my friends. My friends told me that I was too depressed. They didn't want a bar of it. I thought I was coming home to my friends and stuff, and I got back, I stepped off the plane and nothing was what I thought it was, and I had nobody, literally nobody, and I went and got on, and I ended up basically becoming best friends with dealers. Yeah, and from there my life just spiraled massively. I think I was 20 when I first tried ice. So I tried it, and that escalated to every weekend, and it very quickly became our new lifeline. In the beginning, ice was a drug that, I don't know how to explain. It just speeds kind of life up. It helps you to stay awake, which is great when you just want to party all the time. Optimize all my fun hours, you know. I remember hearing about ice being a really bad drug since I was young. So I always knew it was this really bad drug. But then when I tried it, I didn't understand the link because it didn't seem bad. It didn't make me want to do bad things. It just helped me stay awake and kind of like makes you feel a rush. Yeah, is the best way to explain it. It's like a rush-giving kind of drug. In the end, it didn't really do much for me. Once you start using every day, it's not fun anymore. And it just, I think because it speeds everything up so much and you're constantly having the rush, your thoughts are 100 miles an hour. So it's not that I wouldn't think about all of the crappy things going on in my life and all of the misery. I certainly thought about it. But it was almost like it gave me an emotional capacity to be able to think about it and not cry. And I was trying to still work, and I would go to work and I just couldn't hold it together. I was just an emotional wreck. I was waitressing, and I would like go to where you scrape plates, and I would crouch down in this little corner and I would just cry, like in the middle of a restaurant. I just couldn't hold it together. But when I started using every day, I found that I was able to still think about all of the stuff that was going on, but I didn't have the emotional incapacity to deal with it anymore. Like I could get through a shift without crying. I could just, I don't know, it helped to numb me emotionally a little bit. But it certainly didn't make anything go away. If anything, it gave me a whole bunch of new problems to deal with. When I started using every day, I very quickly lost all 3 of my jobs that I had at the time. I started dealing ice in the local area, and I started to get involved in criminal activity, just really petty things. So for about the first year and a half of me using every day, I didn't have a police record, and I was so proud of it. I was doing criminal activity every single day. Like I was selling drugs and doing fraud and all of these things. But I managed to keep out of trouble. And the first time I got done, my ex was locked up. So I used to take him drugs and cigarettes and things like that every weekend. The one day that I didn't have everything concealed, I get there and there was a line of guards and sniffer dogs, and I got done at jail for possession. And from there it just snowballed for a lot of petty possession charges. When I was selling drugs, I never got done. But it was when I stopped selling drugs and I'd convinced myself that I'm not doing the wrong thing anymore, so I don't need to conceal everything. But then I just had all these smaller amounts on me and I kept getting done for that. And after that, a lot of fraud kind of related charges I got as well in the end, because when I stopped selling drugs, that was the thing that I did next, because I didn't want to keep selling drugs. It was a dangerous life. People tried to kidnap me, people tried to kill me. It was not faring too well for me. So I figured I would throw that in and take up fraud instead. And I got done a number of times with IDs and things like that I shouldn't have had on me that were other people's. And I just quickly went from one end of society to another, and I hated it. In the beginning, I liked the danger of selling drugs. I wanted to die anyway, and so I was like, what's the worst that could happen? They kill me, it's the end of it. and I kind of had this death wish about me anyway because I hated my life. So I was pretty fearless for a long time, and it worked. I mean, I think people saw my fearlessness and thought, oh, we'll leave her alone. But most people that are dealing drugs in Sydney are dealing for bikies, or they're dealing for gangs. And I wasn't. I was just dealing for me. I had my own system going, and I didn't have anyone to protect me, and that's not very safe to be doing in Sydney. So having no protection, I don't know how I lasted as long as I did. I wouldn't dress like I'm selling drugs. I dressed in nice dresses and heels and things, so everyone that was on drugs thought I was a police officer. I had some close calls with that, where people would lock me in rooms and try and make me admit that I'm a copper, but I'm not. In the end, I was almost kidnapped by a guy that I used to date, and I still don't really know why this happened. I was there dropping off money to a guy that I was getting off at the time, and my ex happened to be at this house, and it was like 6 a.m, and I just had a big win on the pokies, and they'd just been robbed, and I thought, oh, do the right thing, I'll just go and help these people out anyway. And he locked me in there and proceeded to try and bash me. And I always had weapons on me as protection, and he took all my knives off me, and I was basically left like cowering in a corner in a room, and he just kept hitting me over and over, and I was like, why are you doing this? And he kept saying, you know why. Still don't really know why. Then 6 of his friends dragged me out of the house because I was being too loud, asking him to stop, and that would draw attention from police. So he called some of his friends to come and drag me out and march me down the main street, Elizabeth Street in Redfern. And one of them behind me said, look, you called me to come and kidnap and rape this girl. It was like peak hour traffic. It was about 7 a.m. by this time in a weekday, and I begged people to help me. And they just crossed the street and didn't look like, they just left me with 6 guys. And then because they fought behind me, I ended up running. And so I ran, and they chased me, and I ended up hiding in this cafe and hid behind the door, and everyone's staring at me, and I had to like beg them, please don't look at me, like you're drawing attention to me. And the boys went running past and left me, and everyone tried to make me call the police, and I was like, no, we're not calling the police. And so that happened. And then later that day, my dealer that I was there to give money to, because I gave him all of the money that was extra, he thought that I was the one that robbed him 2 days before, and I just felt guilty about it. That's why I gave him all this money. So because of that, they put a price on my head, a big Asian gang, and they sent people to kill me. Yeah. I ended up having to go to a safe house, and so I had to turn off all my phones because they were tracking my phones, and yeah, it was bizarre. Called my mum to say goodbye and apologise for being a mess of a child that I was. I thought I was really going to die. Yeah. I came out of hiding 3 days later because I thought, I'm not living like this anymore. They're going to kill me, they're going to kill me. I just can't do it. Now, when I talk to people about that, they say, well, why didn't you go to the police? But you're not allowed to go to the police. If you go to the police, you're in so much danger, and you're just a dog. And so it's, what do? I have all these things that have gone on for me that, yeah, they would be in trouble off the police if you could go there. But if I go to the police, that puts my life in even more danger. So then you become a dog. People want to kill dogs because, especially in doing what I was doing at the same time, if I can go to the police about that, and I know everyone else's criminal activity, what am I going to do about that? So if you can be a dog about that, you can be a dog about anything. And so once you do that, people want to kill you because it's just against code. And I guess it just becomes normal that, well, you can't take anything legal action, and I don't have any physical action. What am I going to do? So what do? You just got to cut your losses and move on, I guess. And yeah. I think I got robbed a couple times after that. I just had a bad run. You know, I mean, I was used to getting robbed because people are petty, and I was that nice person that just had faith in everyone. Like, nobody cared about me. I wanted people so badly to care about me, but They didn't. They cared about my drugs that I had to offer everyone. They cared about all my fraud skills that I had to offer everyone, and that was it. And I think each time I would find, because every day I'd meet somebody new, and every day I'd think, oh, this person really wants to be my friend, or this guy really likes me, they're really here for me. And every day it would fizzle out and they'd either rob me or, do you know what I mean? And so I think letdown after letdown after letdown, I just reached the end of my limit. I just couldn't cope anymore. I was just sick of feeling worthless to everyone. I think that got to me more than anything, more than the near-death experiences, more than anything. I just wanted to matter to someone, to anyone, and I didn't matter to anyone. It's a pretty overwhelming feeling, getting let down and people just showing the fact that they really don't give a shit about you, don't give a stuff about you, is a really confronting feeling, you know, and I guess it's that same feeling that I ran from all my life. The whole reason I started using drugs in the first place was because I felt like I didn't fit in, like I wasn't wanted, and then it's just magnified times 1,000. And it just happens like it's on steroids, like all the incidents that I was running from, they just got worse and more frequent. I was homeless throughout all of that. I didn't have anywhere to call home throughout those 2.5 years of being in the city. So I lived on the streets, I lived in stairwells, I'd stay with some unhealthy people until they'd rob me, and then I'd leave, and then I'd live in a stairwell again, and then, yeah, that was my life on repeat. So every day I was so focused on having to, well, most of the time I just lived in pokey rooms, to be honest. I didn't really sleep. I slept maybe once or twice a week so that I could avoid that stress of having nowhere to live. So I just lived in pokey rooms. I could charge my phone there. They feed you, they give you drinks for free, like, because I never drank alcohol because you can't afford to be intoxicated, because that's when I was raped a number of times throughout all of that. So I learnt really quickly you can't be off your guard. So I guess there's that as well. So the feeling of loneliness and worthlessness was very quickly replaced by the stress of having to find where I'm going to be, how am I going to put my stuff somewhere, what am I going to do. So I think deep down I kind of liked all of that, because while I was stressing about where I'm going to live and where I'm going to get my money from and how am I going to get all of that, that takes away from the original pain. I don't have time to think about the original pain. So I first became homeless when I went to Sydney. So after Eamon burnt everything that I owned, I had nowhere to go. I tried to stay with this guy who ended up drugging me with heroin and raping me. That same night, went back home to my mum and dad's, told my mum what had happened, and she was like, well, that was only a matter of time, get out. Drove me to the train station, and I had nowhere to go, no one to call. And then for the next 2 years after that, I was homeless. The first night, I felt devastated, and I refused to sleep. I used to try and avoid sleep at all costs. I would get hotels, basically, and I would get a hotel for one night when I needed to sleep, and then tell them that I was just going to go book a different hotel because I'm travelling, and can I just leave my stuff here just for now? And I would have a little handbag full of all of my stuff that I would need for the next 4 or 5 days, and I would leave it there for 4 or 5 days, and then I'd come back when I was ready. And that worked out pretty well for me. It was like a safe storage unit, you know? Yeah, I thought I was pretty crafty with that one. Homelessness, when I didn't have any money to get a hotel, however, if I had blown all my money on pokies, which was a regular occurrence, I had a massive pokey addiction. I slept in stairwells a lot. We're not very safe, so I had, people would often be in there shooting up and things like that. Yeah, you kind of get used to the smell, but it's a really, really depressing thing. I guess I tried not to think about it too much, but I certainly always had those moments of like, this is my life now, like, this is what it's come to. And I think the hardest thing for me being homeless was the fact that I wasn't coping emotionally. Obviously, look at my life, it was a mess. I cried a lot, and having nowhere to be able to break down was hard. So I would walk around the streets, tears streaming down my face, just trying to act like I was not crying. But I was very clearly crying, but I just not having that place that I can go to break down was probably the hardest part for me. I think I can sleep wherever I need to sleep. Like, I shouldn't be sleeping anyway. It's not safe to sleep. I was very convinced it's not safe to sleep. Don't sleep. I often lived on trains as well. Yeah. Trains were a nice little safety point. You've got safety of cameras, you've got warmth. If you find the right train, you've got PowerPoints. Public toilets were always my thing, so I'd choose a shopping centre and things like that where they're nicely maintained, and that's where I would get changed, and that's where I would do my hair and makeup. And I hate that feeling of people looking at me when I'm not okay. So often I would spend hours at a time in public toilets. Anxiety often crippled me to not being able to leave, and where am I going? What am I doing? I have nowhere to go. So there was always a lot going on for me internally in those moments. I think I was exhausted. By the end of it, I just was exhausted. And just, I don't know, I think it's really a really depressing thing that's what my life was. I was really aware of that. I hated it so much. But then it was like the anxiety of like, okay, so always trying to think of how am I going to fill this time, because I've got all this time in my day and I've got nowhere to go and unsafe people that want me around, but I don't want to go there. So I used to try and come up with different things to fill my days, and whether it was just going shoplifting for the day, because what else can I do? Like, that's how I used to fill my days, which is depressing in itself as well. But it's overwhelming knowing where my life had got to, knowing that my family wanted nothing to do with me, always running from that, trying to hold my ground, being like stubborn about it. You know, they didn't chase me for so long, so why should I bother? But plus, once I started doing fraud, that was really overwhelming and anxiety inducing, having to have 10 phones and not being able to talk to anyone on them. And it was just the constant, I don't know, I just had myself in a constant state of anxiety over everything. I didn't need money for food. I didn't need money for clothes. I didn't need money to, like, any of that, because I could make all of that happen anyway, because I was constantly like shoplifting and I had all these fraud ways of getting food and things like that. The only thing I needed money more for was my pokies addiction, which was massive. I needed pokies every day, because that was like my safe space where I could go and I didn't need anyone. It's socially acceptable to be there on your own. When you're in a safe place, you've got a distraction in front of you, you've got everything that you could need. But I had many, many wins, and I would win thousands and thousands and put it straight back through. And that's all I wanted to win for, so I could put it back through. I didn't want money. That was my life for about 2 years. So I would say $100,000 at least. I was making a lot of money and just putting it all through, and I'd make even more when I'd have a win, and because it filled time and made me feel like I was doing something. It's, very depressing. So when I first fell pregnant, I very much wanted to keep it. He very much didn't want the baby. He didn't want his life to stop. My mum told me I was an effing idiot if I thought that I could look after a child. I can't even look after myself, so who do I think I am to be able to look after another human being? And I ended up choosing not to keep it, which was devastating. And in that moment, I guess, I just kept setting myself up for more and more trauma. It's like that self-sabotage almost, you know what I mean? Because then that happens, and then now I've got to deal with that, and I'm already not coping. That's why I'm on ice, and that's why I'm doing all these things, and now I've got to try and process that loss. And I was angry at everyone. I was angry at myself more than anything, because all of my life I've been the rebel. Nobody can tell me what to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can try and tell me what to do, but I'm not going to do it if I don't want to do it. And I very much lived from that place. And I guess that was the first time that I really took on anyone's opinion, and I let it form the choice that I had to make. And that was pretty devastating, to feel forced somewhat into it. I know that I always had a choice, but it felt like, you know, I didn't have that freedom to be able to guarantee to myself that I could give that child a good life. So I don't want to ruin a child's life at all. That's not what I want to do. Look at mine. So it was hard. It was very hard. And it was something that I never dealt with. So my family had always said to me, you can come back anytime, you just need to go to rehab. And I was like, rehab? I'm not going to rehab, because that just makes that I'm a failure and the rest of the world will look at me like I'm just somebody that had to go to rehab. And I was so convinced that me doing that was such a low point to hit, even though realistically I was already at my lowest. Then eventually, I guess I missed my family. I was sick of doing what I was doing to them. None of them wanted to talk to me because I just stuffed up every chance that they gave me. So all of that kind of weighed heavily, and I just reached a point one day where I couldn't do it. And so eventually I just hit my point where I came back, and I had booked in to go to my first rehab. So I went to my first rehab. However, I wasn't very mentally prepared for it. In my head, I thought I was so ready for it. I'd reached my breaking point. I'm ready, I'm done. But I wasn't. My intention was never to take the drugs in. It's just what happened. Anyway, and so I used, and I felt really bad about it. So I told them. I went and I said, I've just done the wrong thing, I used, and they kicked me out. And I couldn't understand why they would kick me out. I was just honest with you. Anyway, it's like that self-sabotage thing. That was a massive shame moment. My dad coming and he was so disappointed. I didn't know what to do, and so what do? I use again, because that's all I know. And I remember the day of me getting back to the house, and he was like, it's okay, you know, we'll try again. And I just had to escape because I just felt so bad. And he begged me not to go, and I went. And from there, I just escalated again. I went back to that same rehab because I wrote them letters to try and get back in, and they said I had to be on a cooling off period, blah, blah, blah. So I went back, and that unhealthy, toxic guy that I was seeing called me every day that I was in there to tell me that he was getting on and he had just used and he's going to do this, and he just kept telling me all about drugs, and I just snapped and I left. And he stopped answering my calls, and I left to nothing. So I'm back to square one again. And I go through that whole drama again, and I go out and I make it happen, as I do when I need to. I got myself into another waiting list. This time was an all-women's rehab for mothers and children. I'm not a mother, and I have a lot of trauma around children. After my termination, I didn't deal well with the jealousy of everyone else having a baby, and I didn't get to do that for myself, and so I struggled a lot with that. But instead of admitting that, I blamed it on the fact that they wouldn't let me have chocolate there. Yeah, that was always a good excuse than being honest. And I guess that one especially, I don't even know if I'm being really honest with myself, if it even was just the baby thing. I think that I was also quite convinced that I was going to leave and go out to this great relationship that I had with this other guy who said that he wanted to get clean. He did not want to get clean. 2 days later, he's trying to make me go and go and get on and do the runs again, and I was adamant that I didn't want to do that. I forgot that I had a court date that I'd forgotten all about, so I didn't turn up to it. I'd already adjourned it anyway. So there was a warrant out for my arrest over that. So then I'm like, oh great, now I'm on the run. And so I did that for a week, but I ended up turning myself in, and I sat in the cells overnight and had court, and because I had so many offences by that point, they put me on to a community corrections order. Instead of sending you to jail, they put you into community corrections, which is essentially parole without going to jail first. So I was on parole, which was to this day, probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, which is bizarre for a criminal to say. But after many weeks of me going around in circles with crappy parole officers, I found one in Campbelltown she was amazing. She helped me so much to, I guess, have purpose again. At that point, I was so convinced I was supposed to die, and I met Nancy, who was my officer, and she would call me constantly. I was so honest with her about my life, like more honest than a criminal probably should be to a parole officer. She just helped me. She helped me to get into another rehab. So I just went, and that's where I got scheduled in my detox. I did 2 weeks there, and I messed it up. I threatened a girl over a guy. They kicked me out on threat of violence. Back to square one. I had court coming up the next week, new charges that my mum had dobbed me into the police for because she wanted me to go to jail because rehab wasn't working, so maybe jail will. That was her whole idea there, which I understand, but at the time I was like, it's not very helpful. And I managed to get into another rehab within 2 weeks. So I go to the other one, another mixed rehab, end up in another relationship because that's what I do. I was so convinced that I was ready that time, like that was the one, you know? So convinced. And I couldn't see that relationship, like finding myself yet another relationship was such a self-sabotage thing in that. So obviously you're not allowed to have relationships in mixed rehabs, but this one I had a phone. This one, it was very easy to get away with things. Ended up getting caught out, so we both get kicked out, and I get put on a cooling off period. And then I had to reapply and start the process again. However, I proceeded to fall pregnant in that 4-week gap. So I didn't really realise that until I had got myself back into detox. So I go into detox knowing that, not knowing what to do. And I guess I'd already had one termination, and so I thought, you know, I'm gonna have this child and it's going to be the thing that fixes me, you know. I'm not going to go back to drugs because I'm going to have a purpose now. Convince myself of all of the things that life could look like for me, and being a Christian-based rehab, they all supported those views, being pro-life. And I decided that, and I needed to get myself right before I can bring another human into the world. So I decided not to keep the baby. I definitely didn't really believe in God at that point, but I didn't really know what I believed in. So just in case, I prayed about it, and I apologized, you know, to God that maybe I'm making the wrong choice. I don't know. Maybe you're going to hate me for killing a child. I don't know. But all I know is that I think it's worse for me to bring a child into this situation, to be honest. So all of that happened. They said that the rehab told me that they would support my choices no matter what. I booked in to go to the clinic to get my termination, and the day before I was due to go, they told me that they couldn't support my choices anymore based on their beliefs about pro-life. They couldn't support me to end a life. So 24 hours before I'm meant to go through with this, I have no way to get there. I don't know anyone up here. So I have another guy, right, who steps in to be my knight in shining armour. Lo and behold, I end up in a relationship with him. So I was very vulnerable, and I was not coping well with the termination. I was so depressed about it. The manager of the rehab said that she would graduate me early because I was becoming quite a headache for her. So she tried to convince me to leave. When I said no, she bargained with me to end my program earlier than anyone else, which I was happy with, because that's all I wanted, was to get in and get out. Mick turns on me and tells me he doesn't want to do this anymore because I'm too emotional and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm left back with nothing and no one, feeling very unwanted. And at that point, I've been there for 3 months. Why am I not feeling better? Like, I've been off drugs for 3 months, and yet I'm not coping internally. I still don't know what to do with myself. sat on it for a day. I thought about it a lot. I gave it a day. I decided I was going to hang myself. And I really, really weighed it all up. I weighed up, is it selfish or is it selfless? I don't want to be selfish. I don't want to just end it because I'm selfish. I thought about everybody I'm going to impact. How is this going to impact my mum and dad? And is it going to be worse for them to live through me being a stuff up for the rest of my life? Or is it going to be worse for them to just get it over with? They just get to say their goodbyes and deal with the grief and move on, Everyone can just move on. I don't know, I guess at that point I just gave up, and I eventually did it. And it didn't work for me. So when my feet kept catching and I kept being able to breathe because my feet would catch the stump, I realised, and I was so angry. I felt so frustrated, and the motorbikers came and seen me and asked me if I was okay and helped get me down and stuff, and I screamed at them to leave me alone, and they did. By then my roommate has been calling me for ages. I told her where I was and she came out and she brought Mick with her. He got so angry at me and didn't even acknowledge the fact that I had cuts all over my neck, and he just told me I was being an idiot, and I got so angry and I just screamed and I scratched my whole face. And my face was bleeding, and he tried to bash me because he said something and I lunged at him, and then he tried to hit me, and I was like, I just tried to kill myself. Do you really think I'm scared right now? Go nuts. They put me in a car and drove me to mental health. I was there by myself. They just dropped me off and left me there. And then they called the rehab to come and pick me back up again to take me home because I'd been cleared to go home. So somebody came out to pick me up, took me back. They put me in isolation for the night. And it was in that moment that I kind of prayed for the first time and asked God, I don't know, I was so angry. I was so angry that I was still alive. What even is the point? So I was more fighting with him than anything. And I was if this is really what you want, I don't get it. This makes no sense to me. But if you want me alive for whatever reason, then just put me where I'm supposed to be, because none of this makes sense. I'm not coping. This isn't working for me. I don't know where to go. I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore. I just felt so hopeless, and I had no idea. A caseworker said to me that she'd just called a place called Destiny Haven, and she'd always told me I need to go to an all-women's rehab, an all-women's Christian rehab, and I was always said, no, I'm not doing that, because I didn't really want to have to let go of my unhealthy relationships and things. And she told me that I had to call the place myself. So when I got back, I called, and they gave me the longest form I've ever seen to fill out. And she's like, oh, it might take you a few days. And I had it filled out within an hour and sent back. Yeah, I guess that's how I found Destiny. And so my dad kind of knew something was up, and then I have to call them from mental health to tell them I've just tried to hang myself. That was one of the worst moments, I think. Having to put it into words. Now I can say it, but in that time that moment was massive. It changed everything. Went all in at that moment, which was massive. And my mum drove up yet again to take me to my next rehab. So when I finally got accepted, I had to do an interview with Janine, the CEO of Destiny, and she had read I like to call it my rehab resume, and it's terrible because I would go to somewhere and then I'd leave within a day, anywhere between a day and a month. So she was very, very firm with me on the phone, asking me why this was going to be any different. Thankfully, Janine believed me, and yeah, she let me come. It was everything I was terrified of. No phone, all women, all Christian, all these things that I remember calling people in mental health, acting like I was going to death row, like everyone's going, I'm like, where are you going? I can't even have a phone, there's no TV, I can't do anything. And I just thought it was going to be the worst experience ever, and all of it is every reason that it worked. This was the place that got me well. Destiny was the place that made me feel more welcome and more at home than anywhere else I'd ever been. And that was in a matter of days. I felt that. I mean, I was still really standoffish, and I was still really convinced that nobody here was just here volunteering for the sake of it. There's got to be an ulterior motive, and I was so sure that they all just thought I was going to fail. So then I stayed because I was rebellious, and I thought, oh, they all think I'm going to fail, so now I'm going to stay just to prove everyone wrong. And that was my motive for staying for the first month, because I was so sure that, yeah, people just doubted me, and I just lived from all of these places of everything else I'd just experienced, and I brought all of those feelings here. But nobody here treated me like that, and yeah. The reality didn't really kick in until the next day. I was very, very triggered and bawled my eyes out in Devos and couldn't speak. I refused to speak, and yeah. I went to my room and I cried, and then Janine came in and said, what's going on? I said, I don't know. Because she asked me in the moment, she said, well, what are you feeling? And I was like, I don't know. And then she's like, well, you need to write a journal before you come and do anything. And I was like, fine. And so she gave me like the feelings list. So it's got like a list of all these different feelings that usually like you'd never know how to articulate. And so I was able to sit down, and I ended up, I think I counted them afterwards, and there was something like 42 feelings. And I wrote for about 4 pages. And I guess that was like a bit of a wake up that actually I do know what I'm feeling, and I do know what's going on for me. And I'd never known how to do that before. So that was another reason I was like, yeah, okay, maybe this will work. I realized I was somewhere where I could be honest and not get in trouble for it. Like, honesty is valued there, so that was helpful. Destiny is different because you learn how to, again, articulate your feelings and figure out what it is that's actually going on. So usually at other places, I was able to just have a meltdown, shut off from the world and close everyone out. And I could do that, I could get away with that. I wasn't forced into having to share and having to like get to the bottom of what was going on with me. Do you know what I mean? There was always something else I could do rather than focusing on what was really going on, which is the whole reason that you use drugs, well, that I used drugs, because I didn't want to face what was going on inside of me. So using drugs is a way to escape that. And I guess when I can't use drugs, there's another way to do it always. You can't really do that there, because if you're upset and somebody notices it, they tell you to go write a feelings journal. And yeah, you can ignore that if you want, and you can go and sit in your room and sob for 2 hours, and they'll let that happen, but eventually you're going to have to write that feelings journal, and you're not going to get away with it, or you're going to have to go into the office and have a big long conversation like I used to, and where you actually get to the bottom of what's going on. And that's massive. Like, I was never going to get better, and I think that's the same for most people, if I wasn't able to deal with my feelings and what happens inside of my head. And I guess at Destiny, you learn how to do that, and you learn how to do it in a safe and healthy way. Whether it's doing feelings journals or like talking it out, or like all the modules that you go through that like teach you about yourself and why I am the way I am, and the trauma that I've been through and working through that is massive. I think until I sorted all of that out, I was never gonna change. It was really easy for me to see some events in my life as trauma. So like the sexual assaults and the physical abuse that I experienced throughout the using, that was, I could look at that and go, yep, that's trauma. Like, clearly that wasn't supposed to happen. I think I still blamed myself for most of that though, because to me, if I didn't put myself in that situation to begin with, it wouldn't have happened. So it's not the fact that, you know, no one else is to blame. They certainly are, they're at fault too, and I could recognize that, but I couldn't let myself be too angry, because I used to always just, the first thing I would think was, well, you put yourself in this situation. And that stemmed back from something that was said to me by someone who was supposed to love me and care the most. So I guess that stuck with me. But I learned the most out of the traumas that I never recognized as traumas, like the attachment trauma that I experienced growing up. My parents weren't really around because they were working, and I guess that was the thing that I struggled the most with, because they were doing it for good reasons, right? So it's not as if like I was neglected, because I wasn't. They were out there earning money to be able to feed us, and you know, like they were captain of the fire brigade and all these other things, because they're doing great things for the community, which is amazing. But I guess the trauma was where it left me and how I felt throughout all of it. And even them being in the fire brigade, the trauma that I experienced every time they'd leave the house, because I was so afraid that they were going to die. Like, with the younger traumas, the stuff that I used to look at as little, it was helpful to understand it, but then to realize what I needed in those moments. So doing the group Understanding Trauma with Janine is amazing, because like, yes, you get to identify all the traumas and everything like that, but then you get to go back and help your younger self and give yourself healing in the way that was never provided externally. Like, I can go through anything in life, but if I can't give myself the love and healing that I need, and the acceptance I think is a bigger one as well, then it doesn't matter what anyone else says or does. It's never going to be enough. So yes, I need more than most, but if I can't give anything to myself, then no matter what they give me, it's never going to be enough, which is what I found in relationships. So that's why relationships used to be a really big one for me. And I mean, I had a few like couple year-long ones, but most of them were very short-lived, because I just was never satisfied with what somebody else could give me, like in terms of love, and it never felt real, and it never felt good enough, and so I'd portray that onto everyone else, and then I'm always dissatisfied in the end, and then I just leave, and then I start again and try again, and it never really worked for me. And now, like, that I've done all that work, I'm in a relationship with somebody that like can give me all the love I need, but you know, like, we still don't need to be around each other every minute of the day, because I'm satisfied within myself now, like, and I never had that before. So now I have a healthy relationship, and I'm not portraying all of my, I guess, my neediness onto other people, so it works. And I'm actually happy for the first time in a relationship, so I never had that before. The staff at Destiny were different because, other than Janine, the owner, everyone's been through the program, so that's really helpful. I always found I can actually relate, and I'm happy to take criticism, and I'm happy to take advice off people that have been through it. I really struggled at the ones where, and credit to them, normal people that haven't experienced what we've experienced, and they just want to give their lives to help. But at the same token, while that's great and rewarding for them, I can't relate to that. So they can tell me something, and the first thing that I would think is, yeah, that's easy for you to say. You don't know what it's like. But I guess with the staff at Destiny, you can't get away with telling yourself that. Like, I didn't have the excuse to ignore what they're saying. The fact that everyone had been through the program is really inspiring, because especially with Destiny program, it's brutal in terms of having to face things, and it seems far-fetched. Like, for me, I'd never had to do any of that. And to not have a phone or TV as a distraction, no distraction whatsoever, for a whole year seemed ridiculous. But you're surrounded by people that have been there and done that, and you see how much better they are for it. So I guess it's kind of helpful. Yeah, but I guess the other big difference between Destiny staff and other staff is the fact that they all care. They all live there, so nobody gets to go home and live a cushy life on the side. Even when you're working there, and I know this from even when I did my internship, the work never stops. Like, you can't get to a point and just go, well, I'm good, I don't have to do any other work now. Like, every day there's always something, and they have to grow at the same pace that we have to grow, which is amazing. Like, it's not like they're better than us or anything like that. It's everyone's on the same page, everyone's on their own journey, so that's really good as well. I was in program at Destiny for, I think it was like 13 months or something like that. And then I stayed on to do internship, so I did a year of internship. So when the girls finish program, they have the opportunity to become an intern, which is basically, I guess, being a mentor for the girls in the program, and doing whatever needs to be done. So for me, like, I was in charge of the kitchen, and then I guess running errands and taking the girls places wherever they need to go. It's a great transition period as well. So for me, I knew I was moving to Newcastle because I was never going back to Sydney, but I still didn't have relationships. Yeah, so if I didn't have friends and, I guess, stability, I wouldn't last, because again, you can't just go out on your own after having such great support for a year and expect it all to work, because it's never going to work that way. So I wanted to focus on building relationships, so I got myself into a church and into a Connect group, and I made friends, and I ended up finding somebody in church to move out with eventually. But so there's that side for yourself, which is great, but then I guess for the girls in program, it's helpful for them because, like, you've got to the finish line, which is where every girl wants to get to. I think, like, you spend that year dreaming about the day that you're going to graduate and how amazing it's going to be. And so when you see, like, somebody that's been ahead of you get there, then when they stay on, I guess it's proof that you can graduate, and it's not a trap. So it's not a jail. You're not there because you're forced to be. Like, girls choose to stay, which is amazing as well. So you've done the year, which to most people seems amazing, but to choose to stay to do longer is, I guess, a testament to the program and to Destiny and the culture that they've built there, because girls don't just want to get up and leave as soon as they can. Like, we actually want to stay on, and because we've got great support there and we've got everything that we need. When you do an internship, you're also encouraged to study. So I never studied when I finished high school because I had to work and I had to support myself, and I guess throughout that I only just scraped through at high school. So I kind of had a lot of wrong beliefs about studying. So I started studying interior design, which was something that I always wanted to do, and I'd wanted to do it maybe 4 or 5 years before that, but I kind of put it in the too hard basket and made other little excuses that justified why I wouldn't do it. And yeah, I think I learned a lot throughout that process, and it was really helpful to start studying while I was still at Destiny, because I was able to talk through it all. So instead of just getting to a part where I go, oh no, it's too hard, I can't do it, and giving up, like, you allocated study time. And so for me, I knew that I can't have a whole day of study and go back with nothing. So it's kind of like that accountability that got me through it. So I was surrounded by people that could ask for help and encouragement, and I guess it was really cool as well celebrating little wins within that. So like when I would get really good marks on a module, like everyone's so proud about it, and that was really helpful as well, because for me, like, affirmation's a great thing and it's really encouraging for me. So to be surrounded by people that are genuinely invested in what you're doing with your life is pretty amazing. Yeah, it was much more rewarding now, knowing that I was putting in effort and getting marked well for that. I can do things. It's pretty amazing. I didn't think that I could do things before. Or do them well, at least. So my dream was always to do interior design. I didn't really know what that looked like. I liked the idea of it. And again, that was challenging because I never thought of myself as like a creative person either, because like I can't paint or draw or do anything like that. So I kind of had a lot of self-doubt around my capabilities. But when I finished my internship, I went on to sell furniture, and I was designing furniture and like where I could and things like that. And after that, so I did that for a year, and then I got a job designing kitchens. So it's been really cool, and I love doing it. So now I work for a different company because I've kind of stepped up a little bit, and I'm doing really well at it. And I guess it's cool to see where this has taken me, because when I first started studying interior design, I didn't really know what it looked like. Am I decorating people's houses, or am I, like, there's so many options for it, and I didn't really have a clear path when I started. I just knew it was something that I was interested in, so I wanted to do it. So to kind of have fallen onto this path that I actually love has been really cool. So I love my job now, and I work really long hours, and I'm happy doing it because it's something that I actually enjoy doing. So yes, like, it's still work to me, because work is always going to be work. They say if you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life. Not true, you still work, but I'm happy doing it. And I come home and I might be exhausted, but I feel really rewarded at the end of it, because I'm creating things that people love and that they want to spend a lot of money on, which is a good feeling, knowing that I actually am capable and I am creative. Yeah. So after Destiny, I moved in with my friend from church, which was amazing to move in with a girl that I had befriended at church. So I wasn't just moving in with some stranger, I moved in with somebody that I knew and that had the same values as me, which was important to me. And then it's been kind of interesting since then, because I still have all my friends from church, but then I met my partner, and now we live together, and a lot of my closest friends are his friends who are not Christian. It's interesting because I'm the only one that lives differently, I guess, and that goes to church and all of that. And I always wondered what it would be like trying to be friends with what I call normal people, because although yes, I am normal, I guess I've got different values and boundaries than most people do that I class as normal. Like, they don't have to be so concerned about what situations they put themselves in and things like that. And I was really worried about how people would take me. And although yes, they live differently to me, like, they're all so understanding of how I am and why I am the way I am and why I need to have bigger boundaries than most people and things like that around the situations I put myself in, and everyone's great about it. And I always thought, like, people would maybe judge me and things like that, but it's not the case. Even talking to, like, employers about my past, like, I've done that as well. So I learnt that I had to kind of be a little bit honest, because people were doing police checks on me. Because when you get a job, that's a common occurrence now. So one company asked me if they could do a police check, and I said, yeah, you can, but let me be honest first, because I figured it would be better coming from me, and I did not get that job. So from there, I was quite aware that not everyone's going to be accepting, but I guess it's better they know now than down the track. Yeah, so I told my then boss, but he was amazing about it and gave me the job. So I guess I learnt, I don't know, I'm still glad that I was honest with everyone, and I think for me, I kind of helped me weed out the people. Like, I don't want to work for someone if they're going to judge me for my past anyway, to be honest. And since then, like, the job that I have now, he knows everything, and he still offered me the job. And I think moving forward, I don't tell everyone. I think I'm kind of careful. I choose my audience. I get to know somebody before I tell them, especially when it's to do with work. I always thought that I'd always have to lie about my past, and I'd never be able to be honest because I'd always be judged for it. But it's not been the case for me at all. I think it's been really helpful being honest, because I don't have to live in shame, and I know that personally. But if I live my life avoiding telling everyone the truth, then I am kind of living in shame. And I think it's important to choose your audience. Not everybody has to know my life, but I think for me, I feel better knowing that when I get close to somebody, they can know, and that's okay. And I've never been judged for it yet. Well, not that they tell me anyway. So, and if they judge me internally, then that's on them. I guess Destiny kind of helped me get to that place of accepting my past is my past, but that doesn't define who I am now. The journey doesn't ever stop, I don't think. I think even after Destiny, the journey's different for me now. I don't have a counsellor now because I'm pretty happy within my life, and I know that if circumstances ever change for me, then yes, I will probably start seeing a counsellor again. So for me, I'm kind of just playing it all by ear, but that doesn't mean that the journey's over. So every day there's always things that I need to work on. But I think it's weird because a lot of the time I forget my past. Do you know, like I've got this normal life now that I love and I'm so happy every day. Not every day, like there's obviously things that go on for me every day, and I still have days that I'm just sad and I don't really know why. I know what I need to do in moments that are hard now, and that's, I guess, the journey that needs to continue, is that I'm always aware of my own feelings and what's going on for me, and that I actually process it in the right ways. But I think it's a lifelong journey, and everyone's on a lifelong journey. It never ends. You never get to a place where you're like, oh yeah, I'm good. I don't need to worry about anything anymore. Like, I'm so aware that things can change for me pretty quickly. All it takes is one terrible decision and I can end up right back where I was. But I know what that decision is, and I know how to stop myself from getting there. And I never thought that I'd say this, but I don't ever feel the desire to use drugs. Like, I always thought that it would be a lifelong battle for me, because I know so many people talk about that being the case, but for me, I don't feel that. I think I'm so repulsed by it and where it got me that I never want to live that life again. So I don't think it's really the drug side of it that's my lifelong battle now. I think it's just the internal and processing emotions and feeling things that is going to be my biggest battle, because my thoughts can get dark quickly. So like my mental health side of it. So as long as I'm aware of all of that and I reach out for help when I need help, and I can actually talk to people about my feelings, and I think I'm in a good place. To someone that's still in a similar place than where I was, I think I would say to accept help, to not give up, because it's really the easy way out is to give up. I think it's so easy to convince yourself that you should give up and all the rest of it. But the hard part is pulling yourself out of it, and it can be done. It takes a lot of effort, and it's not exactly the easy path, but it's worth it. I think believing that there's a life that can be had after the fact is important, because that's where I fell short. I think I started trying to go to rehab because it made other people happy, and it was the only way that I was going to get my family back, which is what I wanted. But I didn't really believe that there was a life after it. I thought that was, what kind of a life could I have? But there's always life after it. Life is literally what you make it. And you don't get there by taking the easy road, because the easy road is to stay stuck. The hard part is pulling yourself out. And I always looked at rehab as being weak. I don't know why I ever thought that, but I think I've learned that it's certainly not the weak option. It takes so much strength to go to rehab and to work through all your stuff and to face all your demons, but it's worth it, because you can have a life. Like, I would never have had the life that I have right now if I didn't go through all my stuff and then work through it all, because I think I would have just lived this mediocre, never really knowing how to process feelings. So I would have always been a little bit damaged inside anyway. Maybe I wouldn't have used drugs, but I still wouldn't have had a full life. And now that I've gone through all of that, and it's taken me to such a dark place that I had to deal with things, that now I can actually have the life I was supposed to have. I want to share my story because I think while I was in the thick of it all, I didn't know anyone that had gotten out of it. I guess for me, I didn't have any hope in all of it. So if I can share my story with people and let them know that there is not only a way out, but there's life after it. So I think it's important that people understand that you can get out of it and it doesn't define who you are. So for me, I can still have the life I always dreamt of that seemed impossible to me. Like, I'm at a place now that I never thought that I'd ever get to, and it's only been a year or two since I finished program, and I'm already living a life that I didn't think was possible. I think sharing stories, especially those of us that have been through it, gives hope to other people, and it is possible, and you can do it, and none of the past defines you. It doesn't matter what you've been through, there's always hope.